Larry Elder, welcome back to The Issue Is. Good to see you in person.
Alex, nice to see you.
Closing argument is what?
Closing argument is go and vote to recall this man. We have to have 50% of Californians plus one vote to recall him. I'm not terribly worried about the replacement side. I'm far ahead of my rivals, as you well know. The closing argument is this man has mismanaged the state for the last 2 years. He shut down the state in the most severe way than did any of the other 49 governors. A third of all small businesses are gone forever. Many of them are owned by women and minorities. I only mention that because the left prides itself on caring about that. He had his own kids enjoying in-person private education while denying that opportunity for the kids who are in our government schools. 80% of them are black and brown people, again, the very people that the left claims that they care about. Before the pandemic, Alex, 75% of black boys could not read at state levels of proficiency, and those levels are already low. Nearly half of all kids in the third grade could not read at state levels of proficiency, and the math scores are even worse. They lost a whole year of in-person education, and that is why one of the many things I'm going to be championing when I become governor is choice in education, so that the money will follow the child rather than the other way around. I understand there's going to be a ballot initiative for ESAs, that stands for Education Savings Accounts, so the 15 grand we're spending per student would go into an account that the parent could choose to use for a charter school, a private school, a religious school, or even for homeschooling. We have the outrageous cost of living. The average price of a home in California just hit $800,000. That is literally 150% more than the average price of a home outside of California, or 250% more depending upon what study you read. That is why for the very first time in our state's history, we are losing people. We're losing middle class people, we're losing wealthy people. And speaking of wealthy people that nobody seems to care about, because of our outrageous state income tax, which is 13.3%, the highest state income tax in the nation, the top 1% pay almost half of all state income taxes. That's half of the state income tax revenue. They're leaving and they're taking their taxes with them. That is why businesses are declining. That is why the Hoover Institute just put out a study that found for the first 6 months of this year, the rate at which businesses are leaving is twice the rate at which businesses were leaving the previous 3 years. These are because of the outrageous policies of tax, spend, regulate that businesses have been facing for decades because of the dominance of the Democrats in Sacramento, led by this man known as Gavin Newsom.
It's a lengthy closing argument. No, but, you know, big picture, the Newsom campaign is trying to make this a lot about COVID-19 and you. That seems to be their focus. And their argument is that if you become governor, the people of California are going to be less safe and less healthy because what you're suggesting in terms of vaccine mandates and mask mandates is irresponsible. And that examples like Texas and Florida, they are doing worse than we are right now. What do you say to that?
I would say, what is my position on vaccines and mandates?
Your position is that it should be up to the local areas and that you've been vaccinated yourself, and you encourage other people to get vaccinated if that's their choice.
Doesn't that sound pretty responsible, pretty commonsensical? When I become governor, to the extent that there are mandates for state workers, Alex, right now there are mandates. Anybody who's not been vaccinated, if he or she is a state worker, will be tested once a week and will have to wear a mask at work. Seems to me that's against science. The whole reason behind getting vaccinated, I thought, is that you're protected against people who've not been vaccinated. And the people who've not been vaccinated are assuming the risk, so you're going to require somebody who's assumed the risk to wear a mask to protect himself or herself against somebody else who's also assumed the risk. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and I'm called anti-science. I've also been accused of saying that children can't contract the coronavirus. I never said that. I said children are less likely to contract it, they're less likely to get sick, they're less likely to be hospitalized, and they're certainly highly unlikely to die. I think that all individual schools, individual localities should be able to make that decision, and certainly the private sector should be able to make that decision.
But in terms of, has the Delta variant changed the science? More contagious, the CDC says because of that, there is vax-to-vax transmission, and so the science has changed in terms of masks?
Well, I think the science still is, the jury's still out on that. I still believe that the people who've been vaccinated are far less likely to contract the coronavirus, far less likely to contract the Delta virus, far less likely to get sick, far less likely to infect other people, far less likely to be hospitalized. The bottom line, though, Alex, is that there are also other costs, too. In shutting down this state, suicides went up, homicides went up, domestic violence went up. The number one reporter of domestic violence against kids are the teachers. And as a result, for kids not being in school, we have no idea how many kids were subject to to domestic violence. There are other ancillary things that were negative as a result of shutting down this state that Gavin Newsom does not take into consideration. I still think I rely on the common sense and good judgment of the average Californian. The average Californian can get vaccinated if he or she wants to. Poor people can get vaccinated for free. A lot of people have made the decision not to get vaccinated. Some people, Elex, have listened to people like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris when they both said if Donald Trump told them to take the vaccine, they weren't going to take it. Some people have already contracted the vaccine and therefore feel they have immunities. And some people feel that the vaccine was approved on an emergency basis because the average vaccine takes about 5 years to approve. And this was done in less than a year. So for all of these reasons, a lot of people have not made the decision to become vaccinated. I think we ought to respect that.
And lastly, Republicans are clearly in love with you right now. Every poll shows you are lapping the field. But in order for you to become governor, you need to get Democratic support based off of the numbers of Democrats in this state. So what is your message specifically to Democrats that are going back and forth on whether to recall the governor or not, and are concerned about some of what he's saying that you might be too extreme and out of touch with where Democrats are at?
Alex, you have to spread your legs. You're so tall. Is that annoying? You got to do that. 1.7 million people signed the petition. A quarter of them were Democrats and independents who just voted for him 2 years earlier. 65% of Hispanics voted for him 2 years earlier. Now the majority of Hispanics want him gone. The majority of independents, non-party preferences, we call them in California, want this man gone. This is across the board. Crime doesn't have a color, it is up. The decline in the quality of schools doesn't have a color, it is down. The departure of people because of the high cost of living doesn't have a color. The rise in homelessness doesn't have a color. People are fed up. That is why we're having a net migration out of California for the first time, and that is cutting across party lines, across ideological lines. That is why this man is going to be recalled come September 14th.
Larry Elder, thank you very much. Great to see you.
I appreciate it.
Appreciate it.